Good evening, everyone. My name's Christy Hubbard. I'm a volunteer with CEA Foundation MineWatch campaign, and we are here today to do our December webinar. We're going to take just a couple of minutes here to let everybody in and let everybody gather. But this is our December meeting, our MineWatch community meeting. I am going to pass it off to our hero of the night, our moderator, Mr. Greg Thrush. Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks, Christy. Good evening, everybody. I can see that people are still joining, so we'll have a slow start this evening. Okay. Welcome, everybody. It's really nice to be here. Glad to see everyone tonight. The Idaho Maryland Mine community meeting of last month, we were going to do this presentation that we're doing tonight, but Pam had a family emergency and was called away. So we're really happy that she could do it again or come back in December. And we're really happy that you all could attend this evening. And I know that you're going to hear some good information. As usual, this meeting is being hosted by Community Environmental Advocates Foundation. CEA is a local community group that advocates for responsible land use and environmental protection policies and actions in Nevada County. And one of the projects that CEA works on is the proposed reopening of the Idaho Maryland mine. And that's why we're here tonight. And again, thanks for turning out for tonight's presentation. Don't tune out, tune in, but I'm glad you turned out. So tonight, the presentation by Pam is entitled Air Concerns, Mining versus Cancer Rates. And this is the next in CEA's education series about the implications of reopening the mine. And all of these presentations are recorded and can be watched anytime by visiting the MineWatchNC.org website. And then just click on the videos tab in the library area of the website, and you will find a list of all of the presentations that CEA has presented. I think we're going on a year now of doing these, and we intend to keep going. So if you find this presentation valuable, please let your friends and family know about it, and invite them to come and listen to these live too. It's just really great to have people show up, and we get a lot of energy from it. And so, as I said, CE tries to host meetings once a month to present special speakers to our community and to learn more about the implications of reopening the Idaho Maryland mine. So our special guest speaker this evening is Pam Heard. Pam is a local respiratory therapist. She's a CEA volunteer, and she's a researcher extraordinaire. And she will talk to us about the potential air quality impacts of an industrial mining operation in our community. And so this evening, we hope that the meeting does three things for people: provides some in-depth information that relates to the Idaho Maryland mine, allows people to ask questions of the panelists and specifically Pam and other CEA members if you have questions, and also to learn how to take action to influence decision makers to oppose the mine's reopening. So before we launch into the presentation, or actually presentations, let me introduce the other panelists. Christy Hubbard, who you heard speak already, volunteers for CEA as a content developer for our MineWatchNC.org website. She's pretty extraordinary at it, and if you have not gone to the website recently, I highly urge you to do so. It is MineWatchNC.org, just all put together, .org, obviously. So Christy is going to be sort of running she's our webmaster tonight. And Paul Schwartz, who's also one of our panelists, is a CEA volunteer as well. He's a retired capital planner and a longtime Nevada County resident. Ralph Silberstein is the president of CEA Foundation, and he is with us as well. Lori Oberholzer is also going to be joining us a little later. She is a board member of the CEA Foundation and the land use planner, and she's got some family visiting, so she said she'd pop on a little bit later. And myself, I'm a community organizer for the Sierra Fund and a CEA volunteer. The Sierra Fund works on issues related to mining's legacy in the Sierra Nevada, which includes remediating contamination from historic mining operations in this area. And we are also very interested and involved in this reopening of this historic mine that we think is probably going to have a huge impact on our community. So it's super important that we have these discussions. So I live in downtown Grass Valley, and I am going to facilitate the meeting tonight. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now. So before we begin, let's go over what's happening tonight. Ralph is going to give a quick presentation update on the status of the project, and then Pam Heard will present. We will follow that with the presentation with a Q&A session, and Christy explained how to do it. Everybody can see who joined late. We're going to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you have questions that arise during her talk or afterwards, just put your questions in there and we will field them and respond to them, or Pam will. And after Pam and the Q&A, then Christy will talk a little bit about how to take action to oppose the mine, what CEA is doing. And then Lori will come on and talk to us a little bit about how to support CEA. So now I would like to introduce Ralph. Ralph Silberstein is president of CEA. He's a longtime resident of Nevada County, as I said, and has been active in community land use and planning for many years. And Ralph is going to give us an update on where the project's at the moment. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to share that as a result of all of the efforts by you and our many supporters throughout the region, we have a number of noteworthy accomplishments to celebrate as we close out the year. The Centennial project, for those of you who are not familiar with the Centennial cleanup project, the Centennial site is a 56-acre parcel on the Idaho-Maryland Road and Centennial Drive, and it is a historical site of the Idaho-Maryland mine. Rise Gold wants to use the site to dump more tailings on it, but it is a contaminated site from decades of use by the original mine up until it closed in 1956. So Rise has to clean it up first. The cleanup is being done under the jurisdiction of the Department of Toxic Substances Control, or the DTSC. It is important to note that it is a separate project from the mine permit application. So a draft of the cleanup plan and its environmental documents were posted for public review last August and September. And we worked collectively. We submitted comments identifying many issues on the proposed plan. And I recently got an update from Dean Wright at the DTSC, and they've just finished the first draft of responses to our comments. And he noted that there are over 100 pages of comments and responses combined. Now the responses and the revised plans have to go for internal review and then final editing. And Mr. Wright indicated that they may not be made available for public review before the end of January. It's worth noting that they had to take time to have a new air quality report done. Rise had used data from the mine project, which was not specific to the contaminated site. This flaw was pointed out by careful analysis from some pretty sharp people within our group. The economic study is other pretty good news. As most of you know, CEA has continuously campaigned to have a fully independent economic study done on the impacts of the mine. This became even more important after Rise Gold hired a consultant to have their own one-sided study done. Well, the Board of Supervisors listened. Yesterday, with a unanimous vote, they approved funding for a more comprehensive study. This was a big win for our cause. We are hopeful that this study will provide a more realistic analysis of the impacts of the mine. I feel that the supervisors deserve a big thanks for taking the initiative to fund this and to get this done. The entire community will benefit from getting accurate information before a decision is made on the mine. Also, this would probably not have happened without your efforts and all those who submitted comments and campaigned for this. So a big thanks goes to you. And finally, when is the draft EIR coming out? It is now over a year beyond when Rise first claimed it would be done. There's no way to know for sure, but after a recent chat with Matt Kelly, at the Nevada County Planning Department. We're updating our guesstimate to say that there's about a 50-50 chance that it will be released sometime between now and the end of January. There will be a notice of availability, which will start the comment period. This is the most critical time for us to get our comments in. Stay tuned. We will keep you posted. Thank you very much. Back to you, Paul. Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. I needed to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that update. Yeah, it was really exciting to hear that the Board of Supervisors is interested in doing an objective economic study on the impacts of the mine. I know that one was done in 2008, approximately, when M-Gold was trying to open the Idaho-Maryland mine. And so, you know, circumstances may have changed a little bit in terms of our economics and things, but so it's good to have a renewed study. So look forward to that. It looked like it will probably take about 5 months for this report to be completed, but so we'll have more information as that comes available to all of us. So we're going to, I'm going to introduce Pam now. So before we introduce her, air quality is one of our big concerns here in Nevada County. And most of us know that Nevada County community is already sort of in a seriously compromised position vis-a-vis air quality. It's part of the nature of just the way our valley is situated. But there is a long list of poor ratings that we could cite about our area. But the 2020 State of the Air Report from the American Lung Association kind of says it all. They give Nevada County an F for air quality. And that was accounted for by both high ozone days and particulate pollution, particle pollution. And you know, I think most of us are aware that Rise Gold paid for some reports to be done. And part of those reports claim that the health risks posed by the mine will be less than significant. CEA believes that the impact actually will be significant for this community. And the health risks really do need to be assessed, preferably by independent organizations, such as the one that's preparing the draft environmental impact report, or people who are, you know, knowledgeable about industrial mining and what its impacts are on air quality. So in lieu of having this report, we have Pam Heard. She is a respiratory therapist in Nevada County. And and when we first started this webinar series last year, and I think in November 2020, Pam actually gave a talk on the mine's potential impacts to air. And it was an excellent presentation on the public health effects of toxic air contaminants. And that talk is her talk tonight is going to be a complement to her presentation last November. Tonight's talk represents Pam's continued research about what types of air quality impacts an industrial gold mine in an area might have. So Pam, thank you so much for coming again tonight. And I will turn it over to you.
Well, I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. This is a pretty extensive report, but it will be recorded, so you can always go back later to get more details. Greg stole a little bit of my thunder, so if I repeat myself again, just bear with me. So November was Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and it was also the anniversary of our first discussion about air quality here in Nevada County. So now is the perfect opportunity for us to talk about exposure to airborne pollutants that will be released during these mining processes and how those exposures may impact the health of our community. All of the pollutants that you see here on this slide have the potential to cause respiratory problems, acute and chronic, from both short and long-term exposures. Rise Gold's Brunswick site is just a half a mile southeast of the city limit. So any pollutants that are released will funnel into the Brunswick Basin and the city of Grass Valley. The question is, which pollutants will be released if the Idaho mine reopens? To try to answer that, I took a deep dive into Rise Gold's technical reports. Tonight, I'll share with you what I found and what the potential health impacts could be. What I found was surprising and concerning, especially as it relates to 4 of these pollutants: diesel emissions, radon, silica, and asbestos. And these pollutants will be the focus of my presentation tonight. Next slide. So with this next slide, before we get into the actual specifics, I'd like to set the stage for why we are so concerned. It's critical to know that Nevada County already has compromised air quality, as Greg was referring to. The EPA has classified Nevada County to serious non-attainment for 8-hour ozone levels. The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, has designated Nevada County as a non-attainment area for the state ozone and PM10 standards. The American Lung Association has given Nevada County that F, that failing grade, for air quality due to high ozone and particle pollution levels. In September of this year, the World Health Organization revised their air quality guidelines for the first time in 15 years in recognition of the harmful effects of air pollution on human health. They lowered limits for PM 2.5, PM10, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and carbon monoxide. This is my pictures going on.
Yeah, I know.
Nevada County also has a vulnerable population. According to the 2020 census, in Nevada County, nearly a third, 28.6% of our population is 65 years or older, compared to the statewide rate of 14%. So we have an older demographic here. The 2019 health assessment for Nevada County revealed that our mortality rate for chronic lung disease is twice that of the statewide rate, 69 deaths per 100,000 people for the county versus 35 deaths per 100,000 for the state. Our heart disease mortality rate is 1.5 times the statewide rate. The bottom line is that we have a vulnerable population with chronic conditions that will be exacerbated by exposure to these pollutants. Next slide. Next slide. There you go. The first pollutant encountered will be diesel emissions, including both exhaust and particulate matter, or DPM. The impact of these emissions on public health is seriously. Approximately 70% of all airborne cancer risk in California is associated with diesel particulate matter. Diesel particulate matter has other public health effects as well. Because it is part of PM 2.5, DPM contribute to the same non-cancer effects as PM 2.5 exposure. These effects include premature death, emergency room visits and hospitalizations for exacerbated heart and lung disease, asthma attacks, and it may affect the immune system, increasing the risk of allergy and susceptibility to infectious diseases. Diesel emissions will be constant throughout the life of the project, starting with the remedial action on the Centennial site, followed by the construction phase of the Brunswick site, then delivery and placement of the engineered fill on the Centennial site, and the ongoing operations at the Brunswick site. This project will require heavy-duty diesel engines for earth-moving equipment, along with trucks for the delivery and dispersal of materials, bulldozers, graders, compactors, generators, haul trucks, delivery trucks with explosives, water, diesel fuel, and cement, fuel storage tanks, explosives, and gold concentrate and aggregate removal trucks. Now, you should know that the RISE report states that all diesel engines owned by them would be equipped with Tier 4 final engines, which is the current emission standard for new trucks, requiring engine manufacturers to reduce particulate matter and oxides of nitrogen by 50 to 96% as compared to Tier 3 engines. But if you look closely at the plans, you can easily see there are several loopholes. For instance, another section of the report states that if these engines are not commercially available, then they will use CARB certified Tier 3 engines with the most effective diesel emission control strategies available for that engine type. Commercially available will take into consideration factors such as critical path timing of construction and the geographic proximity of the equipment location to the project site. What isn't covered is the question about what the tier status will be for leased equipment and outside vendors. These trucks will travel the same roads as our residents and school buses. They'll be bringing explosives, fuel oil, and cement to the mine. In other words, there are no guarantees that Tier 4 engines will be used exclusively. So these emissions break down into two parts: gases, which are released through exhaust, and particulate matter. The gas phase contains mostly carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and hydrocarbons, including polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Some of these gases react in the atmosphere with UV light to form ozone and acid rain. These pollutants will have devastating effects on both our terrestrial and aquatic environments, which are already stressed from drought and climate change. Next slide. The next slide. The emissions also create diesel particulate matter, or DPM, which is also known as soot. Soot is made up of particles such as carbon, organic compounds, including polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and traces of metallic compounds. It contains more than 40 known organic cancer-causing compounds, such as benzene and formaldehyde, which coat the soot particle. More than 90% of diesel particulate matter is less than 1 micron in diameter. Due to its small size, it is inhaled deeply into the lungs, where the lung is most susceptible to injury. Next slide. So let's take a close look at what's really happening in our lungs. This is a diagram of the respiratory system. It's like an upside down tree, starting with the trachea or trunk, which branches into the bronchi, then smaller bronchioles, and down to the alveoli. These air sacs are where respiration or gas exchange takes place with the bloodstream, similar to leaves with the environment. Our bodies take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide through the alveoli, while the trees respire by taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen to the environment. As you can see, the smaller the particle, the deeper it is able to penetrate into the lungs and cause damage. Next slide. Diesel emissions aren't the only high-level pollutants that affect respiratory health. We also have to consider radon, a radioactive gas that increases the risk of lung cancer. In this section, I'll explain what it is, then share what I found about it when reviewing RISE Goals reports. Next slide. According to the World Health Organization, quote, radon is a radioactive gas that emanates from rocks and soil and tends to concentrate in enclosed spaces like underground mines and homes. You cannot see it, smell it, or taste it. It is generated from the decay of radium. Radium is a decay product of uranium and thorium, which are naturally occurring in rocks and soils. Because it is a gas, it moves freely in the air spaces between rocks and in soils. And because it is heavy, 7.5 times heavier than air, it accumulates in low places like mines, basements, and the ground floor of homes. Factors that can affect radon levels include local geology, construction materials, and how the home was built. Levels can vary from home to home. It's very unpredictable. So what is the risk? After smoking, radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States. For non-smokers, radon is the leading cause of lung cancer. The U.S. EPA estimates that radon causes about 21,000 lung cancer deaths each year. And there is a linear relationship between radon and lung cancer. As radon levels increase, the risk of lung cancer increases. Next slide. Let's start by looking at our current radon levels. The national average of radon is 1.3 picocuries per liter. The California average is 0.85 picocuries per liter. Now look at Nevada County. Our average is 3.1 picocuries per liter. What do these numbers mean? Well, you should know that the EPA action level is 4 picocuries per liter. In other words, you should already be taking action today to lower your exposure. Next slide. Now we're going to look more closely at the county levels of radon. The California Department of Public Health analyzed results of radon tests last updated in 2017. Here in Grass Valley, tests on 315 homes revealed that 66 homes had levels greater than or equal to 4 picocuries per liter. That was 21% of the total. The highest level recorded was 29.5 picocuries per liter. The Idaho Maryland Mine Project is located in this same zip code of 95945. Next slide. So how does radon enter a home? Radon seeps into your home from several sources: fractured bedrock, groundwater, soil, and well water. Next slide. So this is a critical question. How will the reopening of the Idaho Maryland mine affect radon levels in Grass Valley and in our homes? How could radon impact our groundwater and wells? Rise Gold did test groundwater from some drains and the New Brunswick shaft for radon and emitting particles, including measurements known as radium-226 and radium-228. All published test results were below the maximum level, measuring under 5 picocuries per liter for both types of radium combined. But in 2006, the state of California adopted new public health goals for radium-226 and radium-228. The new goal for 226 is 0.05 picocuries per liter, and the new goal for 228 is 0.019 picocuries per liter. The combined value of 0.069 is below the current detection level.
These new goals demonstrate that the state recognizes the health risk for lung cancer from radionuclides exposure. Now, looking at the groundwater test results under this criterion, all radon 226 and 228 results meet or exceed these public health goals. And here's another question. What will the effects on miners and surface workers be when this radioactive gas is released during constant dewatering and mine ventilation?
Over the last decade, several studies have concluded that elevated radon concentrations could be a sign of an imminent earthquake. Radon is released from cavities and cracks in the rocks and soil due to a slight compression of pore volume that causes the gas to flow out of the soil. 1,900 pounds of explosives will be detonated every day during mining. Will the continuous explosives use and tunnel excavations lead to increased rock fractures and fissures, thereby increasing radon levels in our community? So here are my recommendations on radon. Nevada County should have an action plan that will, number one, obtain radon baseline levels in homes and businesses. 2, maintain an ongoing monitoring program in the mine and all structures in the community. And 3, then mitigate radon levels as necessary. Radon isn't the only thing from our local geology that may prove hazardous to our health. Next slide. Silica and asbestos will be released to the environment from all phases of mining: blasting, excavating, skipping, crushing, milling, and transporting to various sites. Both of these materials belong to the category of toxic air contaminants. A substance is considered toxic if it has the potential to cause adverse health effects in humans, including increasing the risk of cancer upon exposure, or acute short-term and or chronic long-term non-cancer effects. A toxic substance released into the air is considered a toxic air contaminant. To be clear, Rise Gold claims that measures will be taken to reduce the release of these contaminants, but reduction in the release of toxic air contaminants is not the same thing as no release at all. Next slide. This is the only technical report found on the Rise Gold website for their investors. It's really a great report, only 179 pages in length, that details the history, gold production, and most importantly, the geology of our region. Within it, there are 115 mentions of quartz and over 70 mentions of serpentinite. Why are there so many mentions of these materials? Because that's where most of the gold is found, in quartz veins along the contact points with serpentinite. These are the buzzwords that excite investors. Rise will be excavating tons of quartz and tons of serpentinite. And you guessed it, these are the rocks that contain silica and asbestos. Next slide. Quartz contains respirable crystalline silica, which is defined as a particle with an aerodynamic diameter size of 4 microns, so it is able to penetrate deep into the lungs. The risks from exposure to crystalline silica are well known: lung cancer, silicosis, emphysema, chronic bronchitis, respiratory failure, and premature death. It has been implicated in bladder and kidney disease, along with some autoimmune disorders. Research indicates that, quote, freshly ground quartz has been found to be much more cytotoxic than aged quartz, because grinding or fracturing quartz particles is thought to break the silicon-oxygen bonds, generating silicon and silicon oxide radicals on the surface of the particles. Next slide. So just how much silica will we be exposed to? Our geology is igneous in origin, with later metamorphosis and alteration. One way to classify igneous rock is according to their silica content. This graphic displays the different categories of igneous rock. All of these rock types are present in our geology. Proportions matter, especially in mining. Felsic has a silica content greater than 65% by weight, such as quartz and plagioclase feldspars. Felsic to intermediate has greater than 20% quartz by volume, and between 65 to 90% plagioclase feldspar, such as granodiorite. Intermediate has a silica content between 55 to 65% by weight, such as andesite and diorite. Mafic has a silica content between 45 to 55% by weight, such as gabbro and diabase. And ultramafic has a silica content less than 45%, such as serpentinite. What's most remarkable in Rise Gold's report is the assumption that 98% of the rock mined will be meta-andesite rock with a silica content of 60%. This percentage was obtained from the Geology 101 textbook definition of andesite rock as being between 52 to 63% silica. Just how accurate is this number? First of all, this is meta-andesite rock, not just andesite. It has undergone metamorphosis, becoming altered in composition. In the book, The Gold Quartz Veins of Grass Valley, that's referenced in the technical report of the Idaho-Maryland project, Johnston stated, quote, the degree of metamorphism may vary in this unit, such that parts of it have been referred to as amphibolite schist, porphyrite, diabase, and quartz porphyrite. The laboratory that Rise used for all metals analyses, ACZ Laboratories, is certified to perform both silica and silicon dioxide tests, yet not a single sample was analyzed for this parameter. Why is this important? To quote Sarah Seeger, a planetary scientist, she says, when you are working on such enormous scales, the smallest mistake can be amplified into massive miscalculations. For example, mining 1,000 tons of ore per day at 60% silica would yield 600 tons of silica. But mining 1,000 tons of ore per day at 65% silica would yield 650 tons of silica, an additional 100,000 pounds. And this difference would be compounded every day. Next slide. The thing we need to keep in mind is that RISE selected the sample drill locations, selected the samples to be tested, and selected the test to be performed on those samples. We don't have the drill logs, but let's look at what information we are given from those drill cores. From 2017 through 2019, RISE drilled 19 core samples during their exploratory phase. Metals analyses were performed on 47 crushed core samples. These 47 samples were selected from just 5 of those cores. The procedure went like this. For every 90 to 100 feet drilled, a 10-foot sample was obtained for testing. A 1 gram sample from each 10-foot segment was then analyzed for metals content, about the weight of 7 quarters. 40 samples, 85% of the overall total, were selected from just a single core, the I-1913, here shown in red. This core began at 167 feet below the ground surface to a final depth of 4,775 feet. Sampling was pretty consistent from 167 feet to 3,227 feet. Then large segments of 350 to 450 feet started missing. These missing segments add up to over 1,100 feet, or 25% that is absent from that particular core. Why are these segments unaccounted for? Are they quartz or serpentinite? What else are we not being told? Next slide. For those who really like to understand how it works, these charts lay it out. RISE will mine 500 tons of barren rock per day and 1,000 tons of ore rock per day. The rock will be crushed to a 6-inch size in the jaw crusher, then conveyed to the silo. The ore rock will then be sent to the processing center to be milled in multiple stages, ground down to a small size that will enable them to separate the gold out by gravity flotation. After removal of the gold, this material is known as tailings or sand tailings. 500 tons will be used in cement paste backfill, while the remaining 500 tons will be mixed with barren rock to become engineered fill. The pie chart shows the percentage of rock types that will be mined each day. Notice, there is no mention of quartz. The bottom chart shows the breakdown in size for the sand tailings. The engineering firm, NV5, stated in their Centennial geotechnical report that we understand that the sand tailings will likely have a gradation similar to the historical gradation presented in the table below, and will typically have a large proportion of quartz. The quartz sand has been graded according to size and percentage of total for each size. 12% will be less than 44 microns in size. The human eye can see only down to 50 microns, so these particles will be invisible. Just what amount of this 12% is less than 10 microns of a respirable size is unknown. The engineered fill, composed of sand tailings and barren rock, will be loaded and transported to the Centennial site for placement, grading, and compaction. There will be 6 fans in the ore processing facility, exhausting 1 gram per second at a flow rate of over 21,000 cubic feet per minute, 24 hours a day. What are these fans exhausting to the environment, and in what quantities? Next slide. A close look at this proposed schedule gives us a good sense of the extent of the risk. Mining and ore processing will occur 24 hours a day for 7 days a week. Hauling of engineered fill will occur 16 hours a day for 7 days a week. Placement, grading, and compaction of the engineered fill will occur 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. There will be 50 to 100 haul trucks per day, with each load weighing 20 tons. Since placement, grading, and compaction only occurs 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, Oh, it fell off again. It fell off again.
Okay, Don can fix that.
Okay. I don't know, it just says, can you get back on?
Pam, we can hear you,
Oh, I'm
And-
sorry.
and I can see the slide.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
That's
you're okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Why don't you just keep going?
Yeah,
Let
you
me
don't
know
need
when
to
you're
see
done
me.
with that.
This is perfect. Okay, so since placement, grading, and compaction only occurs 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, there will be significant stockpiles of this material building up before 7 a.m. and after 3:30 p.m. and throughout all the weekends. RISE maintains that there will be negligible fugitive silica dust because they will sprinkle the material with water twice a day or cover it with a tarp. We are very concerned about fugitive dust. Are there any protections for our community? Well, there are some regulatory standards for workers who are exposed to silica. OSHA has a regulatory standard for a permissible exposure level for respirable crystalline silica of 50 micrograms per cubic meter, time weighted averaged over an 8-hour day. The Mine Safety and Health Administration standard for permissible exposure level is 100 micrograms per cubic meter, time weighted average over an 8-hour day. This standard was adopted in 1969 and is double the current OSHA standard. But our community will be exposed 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, forevermore, from multiple sources to this toxic air contaminant. In 2005, California adopted a safe limit for non-occupational exposure. This chronic reference exposure level is 3 micrograms per cubic meter for ambient respirable crystalline silica. However, there is no enforcement of this statute, and the exposure level falls below the test detection level of 5 micrograms per cubic meter. In other words, the accepted method for sampling and testing is not sensitive enough to reach the state limit. Next slide. And still, the community has yet another tack to be concerned about: asbestos. According to the World Health Organization, quote, no level of asbestos exposure is safe. Excess rates of cancer are found at all asbestos fiber concentrations. Exposure is linked to several diseases: cancer of the larynx, lung and ovaries, and mesothelioma, cancer of the pleural and peritoneal linings. Exposure is also responsible for asbestosis, COPD, and pleural effusions. It generally has the worst effects when a person is exposed to an intense concentration of it, or they are exposed on a regular basis over a long period of time. Chrysotile serpentine asbestos is the type found in the Idaho, Maryland mine. And an asbestos fiber is defined as a particle longer than or equal to 5 microns with a length to width ratio of greater than or equal to 3:1. Thus, the fibers are invisible, readily airborne, and inhaled deeply into the lungs. Next slide. Here is a geologic map from the hydrology report. The black dotted line represents the mineral rights boundary with different rock types denoted by color. The purple area is serpentinite, which can contain asbestos, and the red dotted lines trace the Morehouse, Idaho, and 6-3 faults through the serpentinite deposits. Next slide, please. Next slide. Again, in this map, the gray area represents the mineral rights boundaries with serpentinite traced in purple. Green is porphyrite or metaandesite. Orange is diorite. Coral is granodiorite with meta-sedimentary deposits shown in blue. Next slide. And here's an expanded view of the previous map showing the drill core locations where asbestos sampling was done. 42 samples were analyzed, 2 were blanks, 2 were tailings from the Centennial site, and 40 were drill core samples. Core samples were from 6 different cores out of the 19 total. Asbestos was encountered in serpentinite at the final drill depths for 3 cores, where drilling stopped. So the thickness and width of the serpentinite layers are unknown. Overall, asbestos was detected in 4 samples. For quality control, duplicate analysis were performed. This is when you analyze 2 samples from the same location, and this is shown highlighted within the red circle. So 1 sample was found to be less than 0.25%. No fibers were detected, and the other sample was found to be 2% asbestos by weight. The differences between these sample duplicate results could be due to different analysis methods, lack of sample homogeneity, or both. Regardless, there is a very big difference between no detection of fibers and a 2% asbestos by weight result. Next slide. In fact, regarding asbestos sampling, the California Geologic Survey states that because no exact guidelines exist for determining the number of specimens that should be collected, any statistics that are computed using the quantitative results from analysis of these specimens cannot be interpreted to be representative of the entire naturally occurring asbestos population. Let's see. Based on 12 samples, RISE calculated the content of asbestos as 1.08% by weight, and the asbestos emissions are based on the 1% of serpentinite to be mined each day. Is this an accurate percentage based on the limited sampling done, the testing limitation, and the asbestos variability in serpentinite deposits? Next slide. Here is a closer look at some of the deposits that are proposed or targeted for mining. The diagram on the left is the Rose Garden. According to the technical report on the Idaho, Maryland project, this deposit is hosted solely in serpentinite. Serpentinite within the Idaho fault zone, east towards the 6-3 fault, and west of the 3 vein, may host mineralization similar to the Rose Garden. So you can see here in the bottom left, this green line of demarcation is the porphyroid block, and everything else remaining in that photo is within serpentinite. On the right is a view of the Idaho number 3 vein. And again, you can trace the gold vein along the serpentinite contact here in purple. Next slide. And here are portions of the Idaho number 1. Next slide. And here are portions of the Idaho number 1 and number 2 veins adjacent to the Morehouse fault, again, with the gold vein tracing alongside the serpentinite contact. RISE states that only 1% of daily mined material will be serpentinite. However, as you can see from the previous RISE gold maps, gold mineralization has a strong association with serpentinite. RISE plans for the additional serpentinite material, besides the content taken to the Centennial site, to be placed in a separate compartment of the concrete silo. It will also be used to backfill stopes or empty mine tunnels. RISE claims that 90% of asbestos fibers will be captured by filters on the ventilation system, water curtains, or other methods. The remaining 10% will be exhausted to the ambient environment. For reference, the main ventilation fan exhausts to the ambient environment at 200,000 cubic feet per minute from a height of 165 feet. In the health risk assessment section of the air quality report is the following statement, quote, "The average asbestos content of the total ore is of primary concern, rather than the speculative potential of blasting particularly rich asbestos rock, since asbestos does not have established acute non-cancer effects." In other words, RISE will not have to account for fibers released during blasting of asbestos-rich rock, simply because there are no immediate proven cancer health effects from acute exposure. What a nice loophole. This statement may be true for the miners, but there will be safeguards in place to limit their exposure. Respirators, personal protection equipment, working a short shift, and being monitored to ensure that they don't exceed permissible exposure levels according to regulations. At the end of their shift, they will decontaminate themselves and go home. RISE claims that by protecting their employees, that they will, by default, be protecting the community. But there is a fatal flaw to the logic in this argument. The primary way that RISE will protect their workers is by ventilating the mine. But ventilating the mine to the ambient air is the primary way our community will be contaminated with asbestos. Once these fibers are in the environment, they persist forever, and the community exposure will be every minute of every day. So just where we expect these fibers to go once airborne? Next slide. We know that both respirable crystalline silica and asbestos emissions are microscopic, less than 5 microns in size, but any particles less than 10 microns can be inhaled into the lungs. Here are some charts based on Stokes' law showing particle distances traveled according to wind speed and particle size. Keep in mind that the Brunswick site is less than 2 miles from downtown Grass Valley, and that the hourly average wind speed in Grass Valley is 5.7 miles per hour. So again, you could look at table 1 for 10 microns, and at a wind speed of 3, it travels a little over half a mile. But when you drop down to a 5 microns particle size at that same wind speed, it now has traveled a distance over 2 miles. So here is one last statement from the air quality report. Based on the PM10 emissions estimated and the lab sample results, emissions of asbestos, silica, and heavy metals were estimated for the purposes of this health risk assessment. The consultant is using estimations of estimates to predict the future health of our community. It may take 10 to 20 years for diseases to appear from radon, silica, and asbestos exposure, but the effects will be devastating. Next slide. A bigger question is, how will we monitor these airborne pollutants? PM10 studies will only indicate quantity. They will not distinguish the amounts of the individual components. And Nevada County is already in non-attainment status for PM10. The fugitive dust mitigation plans are not adequate to prevent the release of airborne microscopic silica and asbestos into our environment. Diesel, radon, silica, and asbestos. Oh my. RISE has said that each of these pollutants will have a less than significant effect on our community. They maintain that they will be able to mitigate or diminish the effects with strategies such as using Tier 4 diesel engines, putting filters on the mine ventilation fan, and wetting down the dust. How can spewing pollutants from thousands of gallons of diesel fuel daily, trucking rock and sand tailings laden with asbestos and silica around town 16 hours per day, building 2 sites with this material, plus the daily operations of the mine for 80 years, have a, quote, less than significant effect on our community? I'm concerned that the RISE operation will constitute both a public health and an environmental health crisis. All the gold in the world can't buy good health. Please join with CEA to stop the Idaho, Maryland mine. The end. Yay.
Thank you very much, Pam. That was a lot of information.
It is.
And thank you for taking us through it. I have to say that I got a little overwhelmed at points. So can I ask a few questions that occurred to me while I was listening to it? So, and please, people who are listening, you have questions too. Please put them into the Q&A now, and we will direct them to Pam. Yeah, Pam. So I don't know where to start. Partially, you talked about a lot of missing and inconsistent and kind of variable data that comes from the statements in the reports that RISE Gold has given us. Partially, I heard that you said that, like in some of the drill samples, that they weren't complete.
Correct.
How do you interpret this kind of selective presentation of data? Are there kind of good reasons to do that, or is it just trying to hide data from us?
Well, I think that what WISE will say is that these 5 drill cores are located in areas that they are most interested in drilling along the Idaho Fault, especially. So that I-1913, where they drilled the longest core, is part of that area. But as you said, I don't know why these huge segments are missing, especially, like I say, as you're approaching that serpentinite layer. Now, were these gold, quartz veins, and they simply harvested it and put it in the bank? I really don't know, but this is a question that they should, definitely answer for us, because when you're doing these environmental studies, you only use 1 gram of material. Now, there are 454 grams in a single pound. So when, these 47 samples that are supposed to represent the entire, as far as I'm concerned, they're using it to represent the entire mineral rights, 2,600 acres nearly. It's just not adequate sampling to extrapolate those results to that volume of material, especially, like I say, when you're at the bench, and I've done this, you take 1 gram of material and digest it in nitric acid, make it back up to about 100 liters, and then go run it through your instrumentation. So the total of all of these samples is the equivalent of the weight of about 7 quarters. That's not much material. And I think to just assume, that this applies to any and all rocks. Like I say, they didn't even test for silica content. So, and this is going to be one of the primary toxic air contaminants that will be released. So it just seems to me that the answers that I want to feel safe in my home have not been provided by this data.
Mm-hmm. And you also, you showed all of these, all the different veins that Rise Gold knows about and will probably actively mine because they're known gold veins.
Yes.
And most of those look like they abut against serpentine, yes, or serpentinite rock. Yes. So that means that in order to get to those veins, they're going to have to dig in that serpentinite. Is that accurate?
Yes. Now, Rise claims they'll channel down and do cross cuts, but still the volume, like you say, the fact that those veins run directly through those serpentinite channels, I just find it impossible to believe that the final result will only be 1% of the total rock mined.
Right. And so in my mind, I mean, again, I'm just a person that's a lay person that doesn't really fully understand mining very well, but so it sounds like they will blast rock, and that could release silica and asbestos in that process. Yes. The miners will have protective equipment so that they really, hopefully, will be protected from that that explosion and the potential contamination, asbestos or otherwise. But then all that air that is part of the explosion gets vented out to the surface of the earth, and then does that get run through any filtering device, or how do they control that, or do they not have to? It doesn't sound like they're regulated in that regard. You mentioned something like that.
They've given some information saying that in specific areas there will be the main ventilation fan at the shaft. But then within the mine, there will be auxiliary and booster fans. And that when they are blasting in these individual areas, that they're going to put filters, which they haven't described, or use water curtains or whatever other methods are, again, undefined. And it's critical to know too that and I don't want to go against any potential employees, but they will be trained, they will be compensated, they will have health care, they will be monitored, and they will be limited in their exposure by federal regulation, Department of Labor regulations. So, and hopefully, they will be self-aware and careful in order to minimize their exposure, whereas our community has none of these advantages. We don't choose to go to work in this environment. We will not be compensated. Our health will not be monitored or paid for if something should happen. And really, I don't know how much awareness will be given to the community, because frankly, to me, it's not in these reports. I just feel like the whole mention of silica and asbestos has been very minimized.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I live in downtown Grass Valley. I mean, I'm certainly within 2 miles of the plume of potential particulate matter that will come out of the exhaust vents. And I think you mentioned that you said that, that 90% of the contaminants, air contaminants, will be filtered out. So that means that 10% gets out, right?
Of the
I think,
asbestos.
that's how I read it.
Referring specifically to asbestos.
Yeah, my understanding about asbestos is that you don't need very much for it to cause you illness. Is that
right?
And unfortunately, we won't know that either for 20 or 30 years. Is that?
Well, it depends. So what happens with both silica and asbestos, these are inert materials, so they don't react to heat, they don't break down. And so when they enter your lungs, basically your body, the immune system, surrounds it and creates scar tissue in order to prevent it from migrating, where with asbestos, it does migrate outside the body sometimes. So over time, this scar tissue continues to accumulate and prevents that very critical gas exchange we were talking about from taking place. You can't take in oxygen, nor can you eliminate the carbon dioxide that builds up in your blood. So, you get very short of breath. And like I say, long term, it can go on to develop even more serious conditions like mesothelioma and lung cancer. So you basically suffocate to death. So if anyone wants to practice what this may feel like, I would suggest taking a drinking straw, putting it in your mouth, and walking around and trying to breathe. And time yourself and see how long you last, because that's what living with chronic lung disease is like. It's miserable. You worry about each and every breath and every step that you can take. We take it for granted, our lungs, and they do an amazing job. But when you can't breathe, it's a completely different story, and it ruins the quality of your life. And even for those around you, they suffer too. So,
yeah. So given that we are getting sort of maybe not complete information from the Rise Gold reports, what do we do as a community? Like, how do we bring this issue to the attention of our supervisors and have intelligent discussion about what the implications of air quality are as a result of mining?
Yes.
And how do we do that?
I have been contacting all the state agencies. I mean, all of these air contaminants are covered under Proposition 65. So, they're all carcinogenic or potentially carcinogenic. And so, maybe we need billboards around town. I've written a lot of letters to the city of Grass Valley and the Board of Supervisors regarding this, that people need to be informed. It's going to be critical if, we have public service shutoffs, for example, and you're opening your windows, how to vacuum your home to prevent these, from being re-entrained into your environment, if in fact they are allowed to proceed. So we needed that same training and those same protections.
Well, thank you.
But
so
if we
much.
just stop the mine, maybe we won't have to worry about it. So I'm hoping by giving out this information that people really take it to heart. And, right now, the laws just are not there to adequately protect us. The dust mitigation plans, they reference things like no visible dust can cross the fence line of the property. And even if it does, they've got 24 hours to wet mop it up. That to me, it gonna get it, not when this is blowing in the air and settling down on our homes from above.
Well, thank you so much, Pam, for the presentation this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time and doing the research, honestly. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to presume that there are none. And with that, I want to say thank you again and turn it over to Christy. Christy, do you want to talk a little bit about CEA and what it's doing and how to be active with us?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Yeah, I mean, there's really a lot of great things that you can be doing to help. I mean, our core, I've got a long list here. Actually, toward the bottom is one of the first things we ask everybody to do, which is letter writing, right? Write your supervisors. Tell your supervisors, tell the Grass Valley City Council that you care about this and that you want them to protect us. Not that the Grass Valley City Council has a vote in it, but they are an influencer in this. So, and we have resources on our website to tell you how to do that. But there's some other, there's a whole list here of things that you can do to help. I'm going to pull a couple out though, specifically, especially in the new year, we're going to be doing a social media push. And especially some new content, sort of like some did you know little, they're called did you knows, where we just take a specific fact and put it with a picture and help people understand just kind of one thing at a time. And the ask for all of you is, if you are on social media, please share it. Just make it your job to share it, not just consume it, but share it, because you don't know which of your friends will share with other friends who know about this and who don't. And we really need to get the word out. So please help us with social media and share and share and share in the new year. We're also going to be doubling down on business outreach and neighborhood canvassing early in the year. Would really love to have people who can raise their hand and say, yes, I'll walk and talk, knock on 15 doors or 20 doors, right? Because that's really, we're just trying to do it neighborhood by neighborhood. And we have all the materials for you, but we are looking for people to raise their hand on that. So if you can, please send an email to Tracy. She's in Hawaii right now, so she probably won't get back to you for a little while, but that way we'll be queued up for the new part of the year. So thank you for all that you are doing. And yes, please continue to help. We really, especially with the DEIR coming in now looking like January, we need to be ready to hit it with all guns. And with that, I know we've got one more person who's going to talk, and she's really going to be talking about that big brown button on the bottom. So Lori, are you there?
I am here. Do you see me?
I see the ceiling. Could you tilt your...
Yes, I see the ceiling.
There you are.
Okay, good. I'm glad you can.
more
Nope,
time.
you're still seeing the ceiling.
Tell me when. I
There we
can't.
go.
That's better. A little more. There it
Perfect.
is.
All right. I can't see it. So now let's. Oh, here we go. Now I see myself. Okay, well, my name is Lori Oberholzer, and I'm on the board of CEA, Community Environmental Advocates. And of course, MineWatch is our big project right now. And for those of you who have already donated to help us fund all of this wonderful work we're doing, thank you very much. The new year is coming, and we are hoping to have our coffers filled to continue all of this work, particularly paying for our legal team, which has been giving us great advice and who will be writing very extensive comments on the draft environmental impact report when it does come out, together with some special technical reports that we'll be submitting with their comments. So all of this really does cost a lot of money. And if you haven't donated yet, But please consider it as we go into the new year. We will really appreciate it, and it will help us keep up all of this great work we're doing. Thank you.
Hey, you guys, there were some questions that I missed from the community, and the way that they were presented to me, I couldn't see them easily. And I want to, if it's okay, take just 2 minutes. Ralph, go ahead.
Well, I can answer one of those questions because it ties in directly to what Lori has said. And that is, do we hire, or can we get an expert geologist or air person to comment on this project? And one of the things we've done in the past that's very effective, and we intend to do, is to have certain consultants comment on the draft EIR. And that would probably be an expert on air pollution, hydrogeology, and maybe traffic. We're not really sure yet. We look at what is in the draft that we feel really needs addressing more. But also, I would add that we're really blessed to have a lot of very highly skilled people that are volunteering their time with us in more than just the community outreach and the media, but also behind the scenes. People have expertise in geochemistry and hydrology. People have expertise in air quality, as Pam does, and other topics. So we will have a massive effort to comment on this draft EIR. And I think it'll be a big task, but that's where our big goal is. Just wanted to share that. And donating to our efforts really helps, because then we can afford to hire these expert people where we don't have them in volunteer form.
I always want to share one comment that Carolyn made. I'm sorry, Carolyn, that the questions didn't come to me properly, but I just want to share your comment. She said, Carolyn says, even though we are speaking about air pollution in this presentation and lung contamination, but the water will also be contaminated by the air pollution, which will be contaminated. And when we drink the water or use the water for food growing or whatever, it'll affect us that way as well. I think it's an interesting comment. I appreciate it. So thank you very much, Lori, for the donation pitch. And yes, people, please do help financially. You are helping by having discussions with your friends, with your family, letting people know about what's going on. But we are getting into the phase where we need to hire experts to be able to give scientific commentary to the draft EIR. And while we do a lot of research ourselves, well, Pam is a respiratory therapist and she's done some deep research, but we really do have to hire people to help us study these statements that are being made in the draft environmental impact report, because it is our one and only chance to make sure that our questions are answered. And it will have a huge impact on what happens, whether this mine opens or not. So please take that to heart. Please donate. It is the time of the year to do that. Please keep it in your mind when you're making out your end of the year pledges to people, and know that every single penny of it will go to hiring people to do work on our behalf, legal, scientific, those two. And so I think we are done. I would like to thank everybody for coming tonight. We will be doing a presentation in January, and we will have more details about it when it's informed. And so please stay in touch with us. We will stay in touch with you. We wish everybody a really wonderful end of the year, holidays, and New Year. And we will see you in the new year. Until then, take care, read lots, learn lots, and come back and ask us more questions the next time we see you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us.
Be well.
Good night.